to our town hall. Just a few housekeeping things. If you are not on mute, if you please could put yourself on mute, that would be most helpful. There can be some background noise, which can be very distracting for the speakers. So thank you for that. And just a reminder that we will share the slides afterwards. We will post them on our website, so you do have the good information that will be shared during today's town hall. I'm Sam Masterson. I serve as the president and CEO for MGFA. We have a special town hall for you today. We have a session today at 3 o'clock and a session at 7 o'clock. And we host 2 sessions to accommodate the time zones, but you certainly only should feel that should attend one session, but you're certainly welcome to join us for both if you would like to. We made a commitment to start hosting these town halls back in the summer, and this is our 3rd one and our final one for the year. We can't thank you all enough for joining in and for attending these town halls. We think it's a nice way to keep our community informed and to bring you along. And so you know what we're up to outside of us sending our monthly newsletter and some of the other ways in which we communicate. We think these town halls are a really nice way to come together. So thank you again for your support and your participation. In that same vein, we would really like to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We would like to certainly acknowledge that 2020 has been a very challenging year for a lot of different reasons. And it has affected a lot of areas of our lives. And we do want to acknowledge that as we end this year and begin a new year. On behalf of our board of directors and certainly our staff team, we want to thank you for your ongoing support, for your dedication to the mission and to the work that we're doing. And from everything, even throughout the summer and the fall, it's been a very, very busy time. And you all showed up. We had our wellness series, our research series, our Together We Stand event. You guys have just been there. We just celebrated in November National Family Caregivers Month. That was really special to lift up and recognize our caregivers. So thank you, a very sincere thank you for sticking by us and continuing to support us. As an organization, we didn't only survive, we thrived. We actually had a very good year in 2020 as an organization. We had growth in a lot of different areas. We built up our staff team. We expanded our programming. It's been positive because of your support. An organization certainly cannot thrive without its support base. So we thought that for today's town hall and for today's conversation, we would focus on the following areas. We're going to talk to you a little bit about our do-it-yourself program. And then we're going to talk about what is advocacy. And you'll learn about different ways that you certainly can become more involved and engage as an advocate. And then we're going to give our research update. We're committed during each town hall that we will be giving a research update, and Dr. Jeffrey Guptill will be talking with all of you. Dr. Guptill serves as the chair of our Medical and Scientific Advisory Board. But first, we're going to kick off today's town hall with 3 volunteers who are very special to us. We couldn't be more excited to share their events with you. And so you might be saying to yourself, what is do-it-yourself? And so do-it-yourself is a fundraising program. It's very, very popular in the nonprofit space. You certainly have your typical offerings for events. For MGFA, we have walks across the country. A walk isn't for everyone. Not everyone wants to be involved in a walk or fundraise for a walk. Other organizations you may hear have a gala. They may have different special events that they do, an annual dinner of sorts. For us, we felt that the next natural step beyond our walks would be to officially kick off a do-it-yourself program. You'll see that we'll be kicking this off early in 2021. Between January and February, we'll be officially kicking the program off. And what that means essentially is do-it-yourself allows your supporters and your donors to choose their own event. They can create their own fundraiser, essentially. It doesn't have to be a full-fledged event. They can create their own fundraiser. And it could be, as you'll hear from our volunteers, it could be a talent that you have. It could be playing on a passion that you have. It could be something that already exists. Like I said, it doesn't have to be an event. It could be a girls' weekend that you do with your friends already, and you turn it into something where you ask people in your network to make donations or something. You can really turn anything into a do-it-yourself event. But the point is that the donor, the supporter, gets to choose what they want to do. And so that's very exciting, and you can be very creative with it. So we're going to kick off today's town hall hearing from 3 volunteers who in 22, in the sense of gratitude, right, in 2020, they all hosted a do-it-yourself event, very successful do-it-yourself events. And I think that it's going to be really great for all of you to hear from them, because they either played on a passion or played on something that they already do for their full-time work, or perhaps it's something that is in honor of someone else or in memory of somebody. And so I'm excited for you to hear from them. We're going to kick things off with Ronni Faust, and Ronni is going to talk to us about her DIY event. And I'm not going to say too much because you should hear it from her. And so Ronni, I'm just going to hand it over to you right now.
Okay, well, I guess about 10 years ago when I retired, I decided that I wanted to get back into my theatrical and singing roots. And so I started taking classes and singing again. And once my husband was diagnosed with MG, I always did my shows for charity. I decided that MG would be the one charity I would do all my shows for, or anything else that I came up with. So I had a big show prepared for this past spring called Ronni Faust Has Spring Fever, or Is It Just Allergies? And was really excited about it. I had a trio behind me and dancing and singing boys and the whole 9 yards. And then of course, COVID hit. So that was the end of that. And so in order to figure out, well, what do I do now? My director said to me, why don't you just do 3 songs and videotape them and put them on YouTube? So that's what I did. And actually, I ended up making more money doing that than if I had gone live, because when you go live, you have to pay all these musicians. Sorry about that. My niece is trying to get in. And this time I didn't have to. I just used a track. My husband, Phil, acted as my photographer, and we shot 3 songs, all very different, that were supposed to be part of this show, which I'm still at some point in my life hoping to do. But we ended up raising $4,000, and which is a lot more than we could have done if it had been live, because when it's live, you have to pay the house, you have to pay musicians, you have to pay, you know, the other singers. So it actually turned out to be a better deal because of the pandemic than it would have otherwise. My last show I did also for MG was about aging, and it was called Gravity is a Bitch. And that one I brought in $1,000 because that, you know, it was a sellout, but I had to pay the musicians and everybody else. So it was a major difference. The problem is now, once we all go back to doing it live, we had to figure out a way to increase or monetize it a little bit better. And that's my next challenge. But it was so much fun. And everybody who saw the video loved it. And we had some very generous friends and Facebook people who opened their pockets and really gave really well. So it was wonderful. It really ended up being a great idea. The problem is you can't go to the well too many times. So, you know, if I were to do it again, it would have to be next year, because you can't expect everybody to give money all the time. And especially now with so many things going on, it's so hard. But I was very pleased with the way it turned out. And it worked out well for MG. It worked out well for Phil. He got to figure out how to be a photographer. And so it was kind of a win-win.
Thank you, Ronni. We really appreciate you sharing more about your event. And I love the name. And I think that there's a lot to be said about this, because Ronni has been a cabaret singer for years, and this is clearly a passion of hers. And she's really taken it to a next level by, you know, turning it into a philanthropic endeavor. So, and you get to do something that you love, and bring other people in. And for those of you, just because we are a tight-knit community, and I do see so many familiar faces on all of our calls that we host, when Ronni says her husband Phil is actually a board member for MGFA. So a little extra detail there. Yes, Phil Kogan. So, okay, well, Ronni, thank you very much. We really appreciate you sharing more about your event. Very, very much.
Sure.
Okay. So next, we're going to ask Katie Oradini to join us. And Katie hosted a yoga fundraiser. And again, I'm not going to say too much because you should hear it from Katie directly. But Katie, welcome. I should tell everybody, we'll tell everybody quickly. This was Katie's first year being involved with MGFA. And we've been just so thrilled to join her to the MGFA extended family. And it was really nice to see somebody hosting something that was so different, which is the beauty of these events that you're going to hear about tonight. They're all very different. So Katie, welcome.
Thank you so much. Yes, I am, as Sam said, new to the community. It's my first time doing a fundraiser actually at all, but definitely for MG. So thank you for the invitation to be here. I'm located in the Cleveland, Ohio area, more specifically North Ridgeville, where I own my yoga studio. So my mom was diagnosed a year and a half ago, April of 2019. And when she was diagnosed, it was really the first time that our family had ever been introduced to MG at all. So we kind of took the first year as a learning curve to just understand MG and really get our bearings. So a year later, which was this past June, I hosted the fundraiser. And really it was a really great way for my mom to then step into the community of MG, for her to finally meet other people living with MG and kind of just get involved in the community, and of course raise funds, raise awareness for our specific small community of North Ridgeville, to just understand what MG was and to just see my mom. So luckily the studio is actually on a farm. So with the struggles of COVID-19, we were able to utilize the outdoor space. So the fundraiser was completely outdoors, donation based. Some people came to the yoga studio or the yoga class itself and donated. Other people just kind of came by, stopped to say hello and make donations. And obviously the yoga studio is my full-time job in my business, but it's really connected more than that, full circle, with yoga being a way that my mom has navigated MG. It has helped with relaxation, just being more mindful of her breath and connecting to her body as she navigates through this. So it's kind of a big picture as well, with personalizing the space. So I remember when I first was kind of gathering and organizing, and I thought maybe $150 or $200 was gonna kind of do the trick, and hopefully that was like a big win for me. And it ended up being $1,200. So we were super blown away. It was really awesome. I remember counting it and just being like, there's no way, I must be counting it wrong. And so it was a really great success, and just to see her feel supported. And there was a couple people that came that actually also had MG. So it was really great to make my first introduction into the community.
Thank you, Katie. We really appreciate you sharing more about your farmhouse yoga event. Really appreciate it. And we certainly appreciate, on behalf of the community, we want to thank you for choosing to support MGFA and for hosting your first event with us. I didn't even know it was your first fundraiser, and what a cool thing to know, that little golden nugget. So thank you very much for that. And just another great example, just like Ronni being this amazing singer and turning into a fundraiser, Katie is a yoga instructor. And I mean, who couldn't use a little bit more Zen in their life, right? The one thing I didn't ask Ronni, which Ronni, you can certainly feel free to jump in, or Katie, is it'd be great if you could share with people how folks made donations.
Oh, sure. Well, you know, I posted it on Facebook. I sent out huge emails, and the emails had the YouTube link plus the link for donating. and they were both incorporated in each other so that you couldn't kind of get to one without the other and vice versa. And that's how people donated. It was all online, every bit of it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, mine was a little mixture of both. Most of the donations I received were in person at the event, whether they were a cash donation, a card, or people wrote checks. And then I just gathered all of that and made the donation to MGFA. But a lot of people that couldn't come to the event that still wanted to donate, there were online links for them to donate directly to you guys. So it's kind of both.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for sharing that. Okay, so this brings us to our third, what's going on over here? Okay. This brings us to our third volunteer that I'd like to introduce, and that is Jeff Abramson. And Jeff has been hosting the Patty Abramson Memorial Golf Outing. He's been hosting this for 3 years, and he does this in honor of his wife, Patty. And so, Jeff, I'd like to introduce you to talk to our community now about your golf tournament. Let's see. Jeff, you're on mute. I can see you.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, a little over 3 years ago, my wife Patty passed away from stomach cancer, but she had MG for most of her life. So since she was a kid. So over the years, she took all sorts of medication and everything else, and she passed away at 53 years old. So make a long story short, a dear friend of ours came over to me and said, why don't we do a memorial golf outing in Patty's memory? So I live in a golf community, which is very fortunate. So what we decided to do, because we've never did anything like this before, was do a memorial golf outing for my estima gratis. Even though she died, passed away from cancer, she did have MG. Everybody knows about cancer. And so we decided that not many people really understand what MG is, or if they even know what it is. So the first year we did this, and like I've always said, it's a mom and pop operation. It's friends and family that run this. The first year we did it, I was shocked at how great and successful the event was. I was hoping to raise a couple $1,000s, but the first year we took home over $17,000 for the My Esteem Foundation, which was pretty incredible. The second year we did it was last year. We did a little bit more. We kind of knew more what we were doing. And at the end of the day, we raised over $29,000 to MG. This year, I was a little scared because the pandemic, I didn't know if I was going to be allowed to have the event. So I went to a golf pro, and he went to the board of directors here, and my event was approved. Mine was the only golf outing this year to be allowed to have. So what we did was, there were some restrictions, of course, because of the pandemic. This year, I was only allowed to have 18 foursomes. Compared to last year, I had over 100 golfers. So basically, it was pretty much, we had 18 foursomes, but it was straight tee times. We usually have a shotgun to make it go faster. So at the end of the day, we were able to raise $24,000 this year, even with the pandemic, which was pretty impressive. Like I said, the golf outing, we have dinner, we have gifts, we do all sorts of different things to raise money. For example, we have sign sponsors, we have tea sponsors, we have, the golf is $100 a person, and that includes golf, a gift, and dinner. We have all different, like we do 50-50 raffles, we do closest to the pin, putting contest, anything to raise money. And you'd be surprised how many people will contribute $10 here, $20 here. At the end of the day, it all adds up. And so, like I said, in the last 3 years, we've been able to raise over $70,000 take home for MG.
So Sam, can I say a word about
Yeah.
Jeff's event? Jeff's is a little different in the DIY space as Jeff has formed his own organization, basically his own nonprofit. So when he says take home, he's paying the bills for the tournament and then writing a check to MGFA or having people donate straight to MGFA. So if people are listening and don't understand why he's saying take home, Jeff has formed his own nonprofit organization, which is different than the other two events that we've heard from so far today. So it's just showing you in scale how all of these are so wonderful and personal and how they can range in how you want to handle doing your own DIY.
Yeah, thank you for adding that and for clarifying that, Craig. And I just again want to point, and Jeff, thank you very, very much for sharing more about.
No, thank you. And we also have October 22nd next year. The date is already set for the next golf outing.
And he's always promoting.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we do want to share that. We do want to share that good information, and we'll continue to share that. So in 2021, whenever we have these DIY events, we will have a calendar of these events, and we will be sharing it with our community should anybody be able to participate, depending on where we're at with everything. Okay. So as you can say, I can't reiterate enough, you know, these three volunteers, first of all, thank you so much for persevering and still hosting something and being creative and innovative, because that's exactly what you did. Jeff, your golf tournament, you were able, because of your good relationship with the course, that you were able to still host it, but you were the only event that they allowed. And yes. Ronni, you took your singing and you were very creative and you hosted an event, a fundraiser, which is very unique. And Katie, you took a passion of yours and you turned it into a fundraiser with the resources that you already had at hand every day, and just really appreciate that. So thank you very much to these three volunteers. And one of the reasons in particular, I really have to add this, the reason that we highlighted DIY is because we do have volunteers who are doing DIY events for us, but MGFA hasn't had a formalized DIY program. So we're going to be launching a formalized program between January and February of next year. So you'll see and hear more coming about that. Okay, so thank you. All right, we're going to move on now, and we're going to talk about patient advocacy right now and what it is exactly, and what does that mean, and how can you become involved. I'm really excited. We're going to have three folks talking to you about what advocacy is exactly. We're going to have Jenna Mbalo, who is actually MGFA's Director of Patient Advocacy and Community Engagement. And we're going to have Dr. Charlene Hafer-Macco talk to you about advocacy as well. Dr. Macco is a previous board member for MGFA, and she helps lead the advocacy committee and is very involved. And Kim Eldridge. Kim is a current MGFA board of director, and she is the current chair for the advocacy committee. So welcome to the three of you.
Thank you, Sam. And I'll go ahead and get started. So I am Kim Eldridge, and today I would like to introduce you to the MGFA Advocacy Committee. This committee is comprised of individuals from the MGFA, as well as some very, very passionate volunteers from our MG community. The goal of this committee is to act on behalf of those with myasthenia gravis, identifying advocacy opportunities ranging from access to medications, to healthcare, to legislative concerns at the national, state, and local levels. We strive to work with other rare disease organizations to integrate and coordinate our advocacy efforts. Our committee is comprised of topic leads that will champion advocacy issues as they come up. We are also working on an advocacy toolkit that will be a how-to guide for grassroots advocacy for those wishing to make a difference locally as well as nationally. Some of our key advocacy efforts this year include the campaign for plasma donations, the CMS plasmapheresis petition and awareness, and the new landing page and My MG Voice. Next slide, please. Terrific, thanks. So plasma donations in 2020 decreased significantly due to COVID-19, causing plasma shortages throughout the country. IVIG is made from donated plasma, as many of you know, and it can take months to create. Many in our community rely on IVIG for regular maintenance treatments and for treating exacerbations. We have worked to educate the community about the shortage and the need to push for plasma donations. We know the decrease in donations will lead to shortages in the new year. One way that you can help is to spread awareness for the need for donations at plasma centers that use it to develop IVIG. Some sites of care also may not prioritize IVIG for myasthenia gravis. If you are having trouble getting IVIG, talk to your doctor to see if switching to home infusion may be an option for you. Now is the time to go ahead and talk to your provider to see if other brands might be a good alternative to you as well, and also how they have handled previous shortages. Please continue to invite your friends and family to donate plasma. We are our own best advocates. And on that note, I will pass it to Jenna and Charlene.
Next slide, Sam. Thank you. So one of the other topics that we took on this year is plasmapheresis. And this year in October, the Centers for Medicare Services was going to look at and review and possibly revoke the national coverage of plasmapheresis. And so with this coming up, what that would have meant was if we don't, there's a lot of echo. I don't know if that's me or there's a,
Charlene, it's not you. I'm just going to do a friendly reminder. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but if you are not on mute, please go on mute. Thank you.
So if we lost the national coverage for plasmapheresis, the determination for coverage for plasmapheresis would be done more at a local kind of regional basis. There are 12 Medicare areas in the US. And so what we were fearful of is that if it was determined locally, there may be difficulties in getting access to plasmapheresis if insurance denied it. And this is coming at a time where we're already facing limitations with COVID and restriction of care. And so the MGFA put together a petition and 4,000 people, friends of myasthenia gravis, responded, and that is amazing. And we did it, I think, in like about a week and a half. So it was a really short period of time. And so we heard from you, and it really did make a difference. And so we thank you. Unfortunately, it's still on the table for next year, and so we will be revisiting this. And plasmapheresis and access to this is so important for people who are facing a crisis with myasthenia gravis. And then what we also are worried is as the plasma donations are down, and there may be restrictions on the availability of IVIG, plasmapheresis may be the alternative for crisis. And so having access is so important. So thank you for all your support, and we look forward to engaging you again next year in 2021.
Thanks, Charlene. I'll take it from there and talk a little bit about advocacy outreach and some of the ways that we're trying to engage with the community more. So in 2020, we recently launched our advocacy alerts, which are called RMG Voice. These are designed to keep the community aware of important updates or calls to action, petitions that come out, things that we really have briefs, short statements about that we want to make sure everyone's aware of, and to give people actionable items that they can help us participate in the advocacy efforts, just like the petition that Charlene just mentioned. Looking forward, we've got some exciting things lined up for next year, including a new landing page dedicated to MG advocacy. So this will be this will be within the MG website, similar to some of the other programs that we have. It'll have its own dedicated page that you can go to for updates, references from past materials that we've shared, and anything related to your advocacy needs. So this is going to be rolled out in January next year. So we're very excited for that. Some of those toolkits that we mentioned earlier are going to include how to be an advocate. It's giving you tips and tricks and actionable things that you can do. We'll have information about how to be involved with advocacy on a local level, how to take your efforts and bring them to your local community. And then we're also going to have updates about national efforts underway. And as we mentioned earlier, some of these are going to be efforts that we're sharing with fellow rare disease organizations. Some of them are going to be policies that really affect people across the whole who are dealing with some of the issues that the MG community is. And then we're also going to have specialized materials really for our MG voice and for our community. So we created these plans for next year in response to some of the questionnaires we've sent out, the input from the advocacy team, the input from people in the community. So I want to thank everybody who continually plays an active role in the advocacy efforts at the MGFA. If it's reaching out to somebody at the office, if it's emailing us, if it's joining one of our committees, if it's really just being a self-advocate and sharing your MG story with your community and with other people as well. Everything that you guys do really helps to share the voice of the MG community. And we're so grateful that we can continue to promote that information and that we can hopefully get it out there on an even more national reach looking into 2021. So thank you guys. That's our advocacy update.
Could I just, one other thing that's very timely is the COVID vaccines. As you may have seen, we have a statement on the COVID vaccine. And one of the things that we've done joining with our partner rare disease groups is making sure that we put in a petition to make sure that persons living with MG can get that access. So we signed on to a petition with the MDA, the Muscular Dystrophy Association, last week. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlene.
Thank you. Thank you for adding that. That's important. Kim, Charlene, and Jenna, thank you so very much for giving that update. Really appreciate it. And to Jenna's last point, we do, the four of us do want to extend a very big thank you to those of you who do already serve as advocates. And should you become more involved and want to be an advocate, we thank you very, very much for considering that. It's one of the greatest ways you can be an ambassador on behalf of an organization. So, and really, really move important legislation forward. So thank you very much. That was a great update. So now we're going to move on to our research update. And Dr. Jeffrey Guptill is going to be walking us through that. We do award a number of grants each year as an organization. Dr. Guptill is actually going to give all of you a summary of our grant program and then talk to you about those grants that were actually given this year, so awarded this year. So Dr. Guptill, I'm going to pass it over to you now.
Great, thanks, Sam. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. Can we go to the next slide?
Yes. There you go.
Okay. Yes, as Sam mentioned, we'll talk a little bit about some of the research programs. So we've talked a little bit about some of the research activities that are ongoing in the field, and now we're just going to focus in a little bit more today on what specific programs the MGFA supports and the also the most recent awards that have been given out this fall, so you can see what's upcoming in terms of the research that MGFA is supporting. So just to provide an overview is in terms of what the interests of MGFA are that have been identified and that kind of target or focus the research, the types of research proposals that are of highest interest to MGFA are these 5 categories that are listed here. So biomarkers, which are any type of measurement that can help us to monitor the disease or can help us to diagnose the disease or to predict response to specific treatments. Those are of high interest because we're very limited in that regard currently. And this is a high interest area for lots of other autoimmune diseases as well. Number two is disease mechanisms. So why do people get MG? So I would assume that for lots of people, this would be of great interest. We have some understanding of this in broad terms, but in particular, the specific events that lead to autoimmunity is something that is not well understood currently. New therapies, so specifically those that are very targeted. As you're all aware, the treatments that are currently available for myasthenia in the overwhelming majority of cases act on the immune system in a broad fashion. And we'd like to get to a point where we're using treatments that are very targeted to the problem in myasthenia. One, because they may have better efficacy if we're directly targeting the main problem that's occurring in myasthenia. And two, we would expect that these very targeted treatments would have fewer side effects or potential side effects associated with them. Number four are how patients do over the long term. And there are some specific populations that are of higher interest to us. Most of the research has been done in adults, number one, and two, patients that have the most common form of myasthenia, which are the acetylcholine receptor antibody positive patients. And so there are some other groups that would be of high interest to us, one of which is shown below, which is pediatric patients specifically. So we have much more limited data in that particular group of patients, and there are others with other types of antibodies as well. Next slide. So these are the types of grants that can be awarded. So the High Impact Pilot Project awards, those go back many years. MGFA has been supporting this very important avenue of research for many years. And the idea, but for this particular award is to try to get people's ideas off the ground. So people that have really, new ideas that they need to start to generate some data on that will then allow them to apply for bigger awards, typically funded by the government or potentially other private foundations or the pharmaceutical industry. Number two is a transformative researcher grant, which is a larger award. And these have been awarded sort of sparingly, and they're really guided towards very high impact projects that will change our fundamental infrastructure of research within myasthenia or our understanding of the disease itself. And then there are targeted and special project awards. So these are very focused. Oftentimes they're initiated by an investigator and brought to MGFA and are often to support a very special program or line of research that MGFA is very interested in. And then finally is to train the next generation of researchers and clinicians that are focused in this disease, so that we have more people who have a lot of knowledge about how to manage myasthenia and can push the research field forward. Next slide. So this year, I'll be talking about the two grant programs where awards were made. So one is the pilot grant program, and the second will be a targeted research award. So for the pilot grants, there were 9 submissions this year. And there were all of these were reviewed by an independent panel of reviewers, and we use a modified approach that is used by the National Institute of Health for evaluating their research proposals. And after each reviewer scores the grants individually, there is then in this case, a virtual discussion of the grants themselves, and then a grant is awarded. These pilot grants are for 1 year and the amount of $55,000. Next slide. So 2 grants were recommended for funding this year. One is more of a basic science award, and the other is a clinical award, and we'll talk about them in more detail coming up. The first one, which is the more basic translational award, went to Dr. Kevin O'Connor at Yale University, and the more clinical oriented grant was awarded to Michael Hare, who is at University of Vermont. Next slide. The other grant that was awarded was a special project award for seronegative myasthenia gravis. So this was a target award, or RFA, that was released by the MGFA to focus on a group of patients that has largely, unfortunately, been ignored in a lot of research and that we don't understand as well. And these are for patients that don't have the antibodies detectable in the blood on the routine clinical tests, so that they don't have the acetylcholine receptor antibodies or MuSK antibodies. These grants were also reviewed in the same fashion as the pilot awards. This year, there were 3 submissions for that seronegative grant. And the seronegative grant is a 2-year award for a total amount of $150,000. Next slide. And so this grant that was awarded was awarded to myself, and I'm at Duke University, and Dr. Kevin O'Connor at Yale. And now we'll tell you a little bit about what each of these grants are about. So for the first pilot award to Dr. O'Connor, so he operates one of the best B cell lab in the country that isn't focused on myasthenia gravis. And we know that the B cells are the cells that produce the antibodies that attack the muscle in myasthenia. And one of the really interesting questions is, like, we know that the antibody levels don't really tell us much about the disease activity or how severe the disease is, or predict people's exacerbations. And we don't really understand why that is. And so his proposal is to look at some new assays that further break down the antibodies in terms of what their actual function is. And it may be that when we look at the functions of these antibodies in terms of how they act at the neuromuscular junction, we may be able to further understand why people respond to some treatments but not others, and develop and better understand how we might be able to manage patients with certain assays that look at specific aspects of how the antibodies are operating in the body. And so these have applications in terms of predicting treatment response, monitoring disease progression, and allowing us to tailor therapy to patients. And again, this is a very early project. You know, we're trying to get some preliminary information in terms of whether or not these types of assays will be useful in the future. There's no doubt that we will learn, you know, important new things from this particular line of research. Next slide. So this is the clinical pilot grant. And so this is one that will be, you know, easily tangible, I think, to a lot of the patients who are attending today. And this is how we measure side effects from treatments. And so, you know, typically what we do in the clinic or in clinical trials is, you know, we will record you know, an adverse effect of a treatment, but, you know, you can easily appreciate that there are differences in the severity of different types of side effects that can happen from a treatment. So having an upset stomach is very different than having a blood clot. But in a lot of these classification systems that are used, they're not really weighted in terms of their impact or severity and how they actually impact patients. So what Dr. Hare is developing is a scoring system for adverse events that takes into account the seriousness of an adverse effect that happens from a drug treatment. And the idea here is to give more information to patients about the burden of side effects that we can expect from certain treatments, and also to apply that to clinical trials as well. So the total number of side effects may not matter that much if none of them are severe, or a very small number of side effects, may be very important in a clinical trial if the burden of those side effects and the severity and impact on the patient's life is very severe. So he's developed this this particular scoring system, which is called the Adverse Event Unit, in collaboration with clinicians, but also with patients. So patients have also been involved in the development. And for this particular project, now he's going to put it to the test. He's going to test it in a population of patients with MG and to see how well it performs. And so the other thing that's of interest with this particular project is that it has applications far outside just myasthenia. This is something that could be applied to any drug that's in development or any patient population that is receiving a treatment, in terms of better understanding the impact of the side effects from their treatments. Next slide. So for the seronegative grant, again, this is a little bit larger grant. There are basically 3 teams or 3 separate projects that are part of it. One has a clinical aspect, which is to understand the patient population better, the demographics of the group, what treatments they receive. And also, we really don't have very good information in terms of the outcomes of patients, how well they do with different treatments, and do the same treatment strategies that work for acetylcholine receptor antibody positive patients. Do they work just as well for seronegative patients? The data that's available on that is a little confusing. So the idea for the first project is to combine data that's existing, clinical data that's existing at Duke, Yale, and UNC, and combine it into a massive data set of patients with seronegative myasthenia to help us to better understand the disease, and that hopefully will be able to help guide patients in the future. The second project is to look at the immune system. Actually, projects 2 and 3 are to look specifically at the immune system of patients with seronegative myasthenia. So we haven't been able to detect the antibodies, and there hasn't been a lot of research in terms of the function of the immune system in that group of patients. So here we're specifically interested in how the immune cells, specifically the T and B cells, are working. Do they seem to have the same problem that the acetylcholine receptor antibody positive patients have? Do they look more like MuSK patients, or are they completely unique? All of those questions are still unanswered at this point, and so we hope to shed some light on that. And then number 3 is to help us with the diagnosis of seronegative myasthenia, which can often be a problem. Is there's a third project, which is to look for new targets, new antibodies in the blood that we may be able to detect with a new type of assay that has been developed over the past couple years at Yale. So that's the idea for that project. And so that's the summary of the grants to date. And I know like probably a question that's, or not probably, I know is a question that's coming up a lot in the clinic, and that probably a lot of people on this call have, is related to the COVID vaccines, and whether patients should be getting those vaccines. And so I'm just going to go through a couple things related to this in terms of the most common questions that we're getting in the clinic. And so the first one is, is there any risk related to getting the vaccine for MG patients? And that's a hard one to answer because MG patients were excluded from particularly the Pfizer study. So patients that had autoimmune conditions were excluded from participating in the study. So we don't have a lot of information in that regard. So most of the recommendations that are available are based on our understanding and knowledge of other vaccines that are commonly given to patients and their effect on patients with myasthenia. And so in general terms, the types of vaccines that we're most concerned about for patients with myasthenia are those that contain a live virus. That virus has typically been what's called attenuated or damaged in a way where it should not cause disease for people. But for patients that have their immune system altered, like patients who are taking immunosuppressive medications like mycophenolate and azathioprine and prednisone, there are some concerns about whether the virus could somehow reactivate and cause the disease. So for that reason, live attenuated viruses are generally contraindicated for MG patients, particularly when there's an alternative. And so the good news here for the COVID vaccines, at least for the ones that are available now and in the immediate future, is that those vaccines do not contain the live virus in any form. So these vaccines are injecting just a piece of the RNA, so the genetic material of the virus itself that is incapable of replicating in the body to create the virus. But what happens is this genetic material is recognized by the immune system as foreign, and the immune system is then stimulated to develop a response against it. And then that creates the immune response that protects the patient. So you'll see on this slide that I'm going to focus on the Moderna and the Pfizer BioNTech vaccines, is that both of these are called RNA vaccines. So there is no risk to getting myasthenia getting COVID from the vaccine itself. Okay, so that's number one. In terms of the side effects, we don't have any information at this point to suggest that MG patients would have a higher risk of having more severe reactions to the vaccine. But there is obviously a risk that's been observed with the general population of people who were studied in the trials, as well as now that it's gone out into the public, is that there is a risk of, although rare, of an adverse reaction to the vaccine. So the bottom line here is I'm going to give my personal opinion, is that I'm recommending that patients receive the vaccine as soon as they're able to get it. The risk of getting COVID is probably far higher than the risk of the vaccination. In terms of when that would happen, it's too fluid right now to really know, and it's very dependent on the local situation and what's available, in your local area. That whatever I say for our group here in Durham, it's going to be very different for wherever you live. And so that's just something that you probably will have to work out with your care providers locally. And I probably won't be able to answer many questions about your local environment in that regard. So I'll stop there and see if there's any comments, or I don't know. Charlene, do you have any other comments or want to add anything to what I said?
I think that's all good.
Dr. Guptill, I don't know if you know, but you put yourself on mute, but we do want to thank you so very much for the research update, certainly, and for really walking people through our grants and our process and explaining that to our community. I think it's important for people to know that information, to know something about how we award grants. And then thank you very much for speaking to COVID-19 and the vaccines. I don't want to say necessarily an update, but because I understand that you can't just start answering a flurry of questions because it is a fluid situation, but really appreciate you acknowledging that because it is top of mind for so many right now. So let's just check the chat. Since I've been looking at the screen with the slides, I haven't checked the chat. Let's see if we have any questions. Jude just asked, would it be helpful to alert our neurologist to put in a request for our vaccine order?
Yeah, so I don't think it would necessarily hurt, of course, is to, if they know that you're interested in getting this done as soon as you can get it, then, I don't see, there shouldn't be a problem with that, to let people know that you want to be notified if it's going to be available to you or put you on the list to get it.
Great. And then Nick and Lillian asked, any comment about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine or about the Novavax vaccine?
Yeah, so those vaccines I haven't been following as closely. The Novavax vaccine, I think, is a similar strategy to the Moderna and the Pfizer one. And even the Johnson, there's one that is a live attenuated approach, but I can't remember which one it is off the top of my head. So I don't want to comment on that and mislead people.
Okay.
But we do want to say that we avoid live vaccines if possible.
That's correct. Yeah.
Jude just asked, how do people know whether we have a neuromuscular disease in terms of our names coming up?
So I'm going to take that, Jeff. So I'm not sure how they're going to notify people that it's time to get the vaccine. So our first line is really the first responders. And then the second line is making sure that we get all the nursing home people, the staff and the clients in those nursing homes. That's like nationwide. CDC has put out recommendations. And then that third one is the high risk. And so patients who are on immunosuppression, and because of myasthenia affects the respiratory system, this also puts MG at a high risk for COVID infection. So I'm actually asking people to talk with their primary care as well, because they would be the ones, I think, to probably be able to distribute the vaccine. I don't know how we identify an at-risk person. Mm-hmm. If you get a card.
Yeah, so yeah, I agree, Charlene. I'm not sure how this is operationally gonna work, but I think the primary care doctors are gonna be like the front lines for most people in an outpatient setting. And a lot of the health record systems are capable of triggering alerts when people meet certain criteria, either to do a certain test or to alert people that, oh, you're due for such and such vaccine. So I would assume that practices will implement a similar strategy based on the supply of vaccine that they're able to obtain. But how that stratification works and how you order that, I think is going to be variable, and in general, I think is unclear, because you can imagine that you look at the overall population in a primary care clinic in terms of, there are going to be lots of people who are older who are at high risk and that have high blood pressure and that have diabetes and other things that are already known to be also high risk factors. So how that will be, stratified, I think is unclear. And obviously the supply and what the actual supply will look like will have a lot to do with that. So.
Okay. Thank you to both of you for answering the questions. We really, really appreciate that. I don't see any other questions coming through, although I do see a nice comment that I will share. Sue thanked Ronni for sharing her talent for the world on behalf of MG. So cool that we have so many talented people associated with MG. I totally agree. I couldn't agree more. And then Katie, she was asking about if you would consider putting a video together for MG patients that we could share. But we have something like that already, and we will definitely make sure that we share that around any of the unique events that we have going on. Oh, another question came in. If you have had COVID, how does this affect your eligibility timeframe for getting the vaccine?
So I don't think that that's known at all at this point. I don't, yeah, sorry.
Okay. It's fair and it's honest. As you said, it's a fluid situation.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Guptill, for joining us. We'll see you again at 7.
Great.
And
Thank you.
certainly, thank you, Jen, and thank you to all of our community members. I want to give a special thank you to all of our speakers who shared their stories. Thank you to Jenna, Charlene, and Kim for sharing how you can get more involved as an advocate. And thank you to all of you, our community members who continue to support us and who are so dedicated to the mission. And we wish you a wonderful holiday and an even better new year. So take care, everyone, and be safe.